Hi, Gautam, and welcome to Resolve.
Hi, I'm Gautam. I work as a research associate at Peptris Technologies. I did my undergrad in biology with a minor in applied maths. This was at Azim Premji University in Bangalore. And then I did my master's in bioinformatics from KU Leuven, which is in Belgium. Um, and yeah, after I finished my master's, I've begun work at Peptris.
Could you brief us a little bit about your early education, your schooling, and your college days?
Yeah. So I've done most of my education in Bangalore itself. So I studied from Montessori to 10th. So Montessori was before first grade, and then first to 10th, all in the same school, Shishugraha, in Bangalore. Um, and after that, I did 11th and 12th at HAL Public School, also in Bangalore. I think from the start, I've always been interested in biology, but my initial interests in biology actually were more in the domain of wildlife biology, ecology, and that sort of area. This, of course, shifted later, but that was through school. And through school, I also always knew that I would want to do something to do with math, whatever I was doing later on. And because math was something I'd always found very interesting, and I used to really enjoy doing it as well. Uh, so math and biology were always in the picture. During my undergrad, that's the reason I actually picked a minor in math, and my major was still in biology because I knew I wouldn't want to do math as my main thing. Uh, During my undergrad, I started getting interested in potentially doing ecology using more mathematical and computational methods because I started getting interested in computation as well in my undergrad. Um, and I think at some point I realized towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I started to realize that maybe I was more interested in applying these mathematical and computational techniques to biological systems more broadly, as opposed to specifically ecology or wildlife biology. Um, and that's when I actually spoke to a professor at my university because he did a lot of computational work within biological systems, and he had taught us some really good courses as well. And he suggested looking into bioinformatics because it would fit these areas somewhat well. Um, I also spoke to a professor who, by that point, had left the university, but he had taught me for 1 year during my bachelor's. And I spoke to him saying, bioinformatics sounds like something I would enjoy, but I'm not sure if it's exactly what I'd want to do later. And I remember the advice that he gave me was uh, do bioinformatics because you'll get all the skills that you can then use to do whatever it is that you once you realize what you specifically want to do, you can use the skills that you've gotten from bioinformatics to apply it to whatever more niche or specific thing that you want to do, if at all that comes up in the future. He said, don't focus yourself too much right now because you don't know how your interests will change and how your what you want to apply, what you've learned uh, towards will change in the future. So that was how I decided to do bioinformatics, and then the master's degree uh, went by. I really enjoyed the degree, and I think also the experience of being abroad was definitely a really enlightening one. Um, Afterwards, I actually came back to India. I was looking for jobs over in Belgium where I studied, but uh, at the time, and also I think continuing today, the job market, especially in the biotech industry, wasn't too great in Europe, or isn't too great in Europe. And I've been hearing in the US as well. It's, I think, burgeoning a little bit more in India. And so I found a lot more opportunities here. Peptis was one of the first ones that I actually looked at. So that's how I got here.
You mentioned your experience outside the country was enlightening. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that?
So for me, I think a lot of it was actually I think I experienced a lot of like personal growth over there, because it really like put me completely outside my comfort zone. That was, everything about living, especially in uh, countries like Belgium and Western European countries, is that they're very very different from life here in India. Uh, so in that sense, it put me in a completely new space, and I had to navigate it by myself because I was studying there because I'd gone there to study by myself. So that I think helped me grow. It helped me figure out doing, like, just being more independent was a big part of it. Um, these places are also they can feel a bit isolating, I think, especially for us coming from India, because we are so used to there being people all around, either directly or indirectly. Either they're people we're interacting with, or it's just the sound of people outside, traffic, construction, whatever it might be. There it can get quite literally gets very silent at times and in places. So that was also interesting to just figure out, being alone in some sense. Uh, and I think it also helped with my social sort of skills a little bit, in terms of, again, going into a completely new place, not knowing anyone there at all, even indirectly, and then just figuring out, uh, people, what they're interested in, just talking to them, getting to know them a bit better. I made really good friends there as well. So overall, I think it was, in that sense, it was a lot of growth for me. Um, the other interesting thing was actually going there and looking at the university system, the education system, because I found it to be quite old-fashioned in many ways. Um, this could be because I studied in Azim Premji University in Bangalore for my undergrad, which overall, at least the undergraduate program overall, has quite a, I don't know how to put this. I guess it's it mimics US sort of models of college education a little bit, in the sense that there's a lot more freedom and flexibility, and even the teaching methods are less exam oriented. They're more flexible. They're more faculty dependent and that sort of thing. Uh, there, I ended up finding a lot. For me, it almost felt like going back to an older sort of system, because there were, end term exams. There were some courses where we had only a single exam for the whole course and nothing else, no other assignments or anything. So those were a little bit stressful. So I guess it was interesting to see that the education system was still this way, despite, what our immediate thoughts might be about some things being more advanced in the West. I think this might be something that's still they're still sort of a little bit more conservative in terms of how they're looking at their education system.
You talked about the situation being a little challenging initially in terms of isolation and
Yeah.
being alone. How did you cope with this?
Yeah, it was a little hard. I think there was also a bit of homesickness that came along at the same time. Like it was a mixture of homesickness and also just being in a completely different situation. I realized when I was there at some point that sometimes that often other people there in the place in the are also feeling similarly, because they've also come to a new place, especially other students who've also come to study, like to another country, to a new place and everything. Um, I would just start reaching out to people and saying, "Do you want to hang out? Do you want to go study, or like you want to go get a beer, or whatever it might be." Um, and I realized that people were actually very interested in doing that. It's not that. Uh, I often felt like people are just waiting for someone to ask, which is also how I felt at times. And so I think it was helpful for me to just start doing that. There were people I started making friends with in class, and sometimes we had assignments. So I would just say, "Do you want to sit and work on it together so that we can figure it out?" Might be quicker and easier. That was also a way of just getting to meet people more often. Yeah.
What do you find interesting about your work?
It feels a lot like a puzzle a lot of the time. In fact, every project that we get is a little bit of a puzzle, in sometimes in quite a literal sense, because they're actually trying to fit something inside something else. Um, and the answer is often not very clear, even from our models, um, because it's a biological system, and biological systems are notorious for being very noisy and generally, not being very clean in that sense. Um, so um, so it's always, going from one head scratcher to the next. So you say, okay, we need to find something that binds here, but first let's look at what we already know that binds here. Right, there are molecules that we already know that bind here. We study their interactions. Sometimes models uh, give you results that are not what you would expect from the biology, in which case, either that something might be wrong with the model itself, then you need to fix the model, you need to improve the model. It's something that's always ongoing through projects, and even when you're not working on projects, when we're just trying to make our models work better. and so it's a lot of testing, a lot of training for machine learning models. Yeah, I think I like that it's like a constant puzzle that you're trying to solve.
You talked about being a little unorganized, but your work sounds like you really need to be very organized here. How did you overcome this?
Yeah, so this is also like, I mean, I wouldn't call it a puzzle, but it's another thing that's constantly in sort of in progress. I'm usually trying to figure out how to organize my time a little better, both in the office and outside of office. If there's, sometimes things that carry over outside work. So uh, it's hard to say exactly how I'm working at it, but I think just being in office is already a big help, especially compared to university. I think where university, a lot of it is more, when you have assignments, you work on it wherever you want to outside class. There, it can get easy to get distracted if you're sitting at home, sitting in front of your laptop, or you have your phone out there. Uh, but I think in office, having other people sitting around you is helpful, and we are a very small team, so I think I'm often like, I can't really like I can't afford to drift off because somebody is going to come and ask me, okay, so like, did you try this out? Did this work? Then or sometimes I have to go ask them if they tried something out. We have to keep sending files to each other, sharing scripts with each other. Sorry. Yeah. Sharing scripts with each other and that sort of thing. So I think being in office is something that's just helping me for sure. Yeah.
What do you find most challenging about your work?
I think yeah, like you mentioned, the me being disorganized is something that definitely comes in the way sometimes. Uh, because sometimes there's things that need to be done, especially there's projects, things need to be done somewhat quickly. Uh, I think one or two times I've sort of messed up, nothing majorly, but I've used the wrong file for some script that we were trying to run. Minor things like that, and that was because actually hadn't organized my files very well on the system, and that those kinds of things, relatively minor. Uh, Apart from that, I think sometimes when we do these projects, I'm not leading projects because I just joined the company very recently. But as being a part of these projects, sometimes, like I said, the answers are sometimes just not there. There are projects that using machine learning models or using models that we have at the moment. Um, it can be a bit hard to actually get an answer out of it, and I think despite everything, there's this need that we have to say, okay, this is the answer. This is what we wanted to see. That's another thing that sometimes you have to just accept that there's like this doesn't really lead anywhere. So or you come back and try to the different approach another time. But that's definitely something else as well. Um, I think those I would say are the main ones. I think, and uh, because of the more open-ended nature of these projects, I think sometimes I find myself thinking, okay, like what next? There are all these different things that we could potentially do. Sometimes that's a thought, or sometimes it's just what do I do next? Um, but usually when that happens, I think I've been trying to just make myself, just ask instead of trying to sit by myself and figure it out. Sometimes that doesn't really help. Trying to figure out what I need to do next. Asking other people on the team is something that I found can definitely help. Yeah.
What are your learnings since you started working?
Especially here, I think I found that because it's a small team and because I'm interacting with everyone quite often, I think I've realized that it's not just sitting down and doing your work. There's a big aspect of it that's also uh, connecting with people at the workspace, and we have a shared office space. So our company has a bunch of desks, and there are also other startups that occupy the same space, and so we know people from other startups as well. And yeah, I think a lot of it is just I think I've learned that a lot of it is outside of working or even during working. A lot of it is kind of just like hanging out almost, talking to people, being uh, just getting to know people better, being more friendly with people. It's something that I've realized, no matter how much you sit and work. So
For someone who's relatively new to the work culture, what are your biggest challenges?
So I think in my case, this is a very research oriented field. And so when I started working, and actually continues today as well. Through working here, I think I've felt like there have been a lot of concepts and terms, and this is a lot of like scientific, heavy scientific concepts, or computational methods and things like that that are quite new to me. So I've actually had to. I think there's been like a lot of learning that I've had to do just in terms of reading up on things, brushing up on some basics that I may have forgotten, a lot of googling code related things, understanding new. We use a lot of Python, so for me, it's understanding a lot of like Python modules and packages, how those work. That's been a big part of it. Um, and I think also kind of ensuring that uh, what I all these things that I didn't uh, know before starting work here, and what I've been learning recently, kind of ensuring that I'm actually learning those things and that I'm not just copying something from somewhere on the internet. If it's code, especially, this can happen a lot. You copy paste some code somewhere and then it just works, so you leave it alone. Or with concepts, it's a very superficial understanding versus actually understanding what it is and how it applies to what you're doing. So I think ensuring that that's the kind of understanding that's happening has also been a bit of a challenge. And I think there are still things that I understand very much on a superficial level and not so much, not as deeply as I probably need. Yeah.
You have a research based role.
Yes.
What kind of mindset does one need to develop for this?
Yeah. So I think, especially here, I've found that and my role at least is quite research oriented in many ways that are similar to academic research, which is what I've been doing for longer. So for my master's thesis, for example, I had to spend a year doing a lot of research. Uh, so in that sense, I think it was easier for me to move into this role. And again, because projects tend to be a little bit, especially when we start, projects tend to be a bit more open ended. It really does feel a lot more like academic research. So the mindset, I think, for something like what I'm doing would be a more academic mindset, in the sense that uh, I think trying to understand, if you're trying to answer a question, trying to understand where the question comes from, what work has been done on the question. You mentioned patience earlier. I think patience is something that you definitely need for this as well. Even just in terms of doing something like reading papers, for instance, you'll sift through a lot of papers. There's a lot of jargon. You don't understand a lot of the jargon. You need to find the paper that explains the jargon. Um, See who did what first. Did that work? So uh, I think in terms of mindsets, yeah, patience, uh, willingness to willingness to learn, and also willingness to not understand. I think, or realizing that you may not understand things, and going through the whole process of actually getting to your level of understanding that you need. Accepting that at the start, at least when you're researching something, things won't be that clear. I think that's quite important. Yeah.
You mentioned willingness not to understand. Uh, is it easy to admit to your peers that you're not understanding something? Does this not make you look weak?
Yeah, so this is actually something that I remember thinking a little bit at first, especially because I'm like the newest recruit at the company. Everyone else there has been working there for at least 2 years. So I went there and I thought, okay, this is seems to be the case. I thought, I will come across as the person who doesn't know much at all in the role that I'm supposed to know things. Um, but I think I started realizing that there were other people as well who were there were constantly questions being asked all around. Sometimes I think I found a few times where I realized I had read about something and I explained it, and then I was getting questions. People are asking me questions and saying, "So what does this mean? Like you mentioned this term, like you mentioned this concept. What is that?" Or and I realized that it's always like it's constant. It's a process of constant learning when you're doing research, or when you're working in these kinds of fields. You're always learning, and so you always have questions. My questions, I may have more questions, uh, but I think that's just natural. And I think that the people at work have also been very really nice and accommodating in that sense. Like they, I think, have also understood that it's my first foray into a lot of these new areas and new kinds of methods and things like that. So that has definitely helped. Yeah.
Any suggestions to any of the viewers who are struggling to ask questions, who think it's a weakness to show their vulnerable side?
So I think, yeah, I guess it works a little bit differently in class, in college or in school versus when you're working. Um, so I think the first thing that I would say, this is not exactly maybe not the best thing to say to someone in this situation, but the internet is actually a really good resource for this. So if you're feeling a little scared about asking a question, um, you should definitely just look it up, whatever it might be, especially if it's like, actually, whatever it might be, you should look it up because somebody has probably written about it already. And, or watch a video if it's something that you have time to do. That's one thing that you can do. It's something that I continue to do a lot. If you're worried that, you might be bothering someone or, but at the same time, yeah, the reason I'm saying that that's not the best advice is because ideally you should realize that it's not there's nothing wrong with asking a question. Um, especially if you have like done your best to try and understand something and it's still not clear to you, there's definitely like nothing wrong with asking a question, because I think it's very often the case that, and this is something that I will say, especially in classroom settings, is that if you ask a question about something that you don't understand, uh, there's a good chance that someone else in class has also not understood it, and they're also feeling the same way, and they're also scared to ask the question. I used to not ask questions like this in class, but there were students who would just ask questions, and I've told them later saying, "Thank you for asking that question because I didn't understand the same thing, but you asked." And so the professor explained it, and I got a better understanding of it. That's in the classroom setting. I think in workplace settings, uh, yeah, I think a lot of it is also dependent on how nice your colleagues are. I have a like really nice colleagues at work. So for me, I've realized over time, I think that there's nothing wrong with asking them a question. They'll just explain it. Uh, yeah, that's I think what I'll say about that.
Would you recommend this stream of work to freshers, to newcomers, people who are just graduating out of college? And if so, why would you recommend this field?
So yeah, I would recommend working in this field because I think the most important thing for me is being able to see that the work that I'm doing is going somewhere. Uh, yeah, this is definitely coming from like a biological perspective or a science perspective. I think this what I'm doing is uh, more science oriented than maybe like an IT job or something like that. In that sense, compared to other science things that people might be inclined to do, like doing a PhD, for example. Uh, PhDs, of course, can also be this way, but I think when you're working, things get turned over also a lot faster. So you're constantly working on projects and you're constantly seeing where things go. Uh, and yeah, translational research is what they call it. Basically, your work is being translated directly into things that can be applied to the real world. Um, I also think, and I might be biased in saying this, but I think that science has a lot of very interesting people that you get to meet if you go into this kind of area. So if you work in something like drug discovery or in similar sort of areas, you end up meeting a lot of very interesting people doing very interesting research. Uh, for me, just at the company itself, but uh, but also other people around in the office space. That's always really nice as well. I think that's another benefit of it as well. I think something that I can say is because I started work very recently, and because until then I was very much uh, just purely in the academic space, just as a student. Moving in here, I think a good decision that I made was uh, taking up the job. I'm like, I think when I started work, I wasn't sure what, like, whether this is, whether I wanted to do this or that, or because once you leave university, you've done all these courses, you've seen all these possible things that you could be working on, and they're all interesting. So I applied to Peptis, and I was very interested in their work when I applied as well. And I was thinking, okay, but what if I apply to all these other places, see what comes up? But then they offered me the job, and I think a good thing that I did was taking the job, and now I'm enjoying the work a lot. And especially, I think with your first job, it's good to just start working. I think just starting to work is something that's nice, as long as it's not something that you hate. Uh, just start working. I've turned out to really enjoy my work. So I think doing that is definitely something I would recommend.
Thank you, Gautam, and wish you the very best in your future.
Thanks a
Uh,
lot. Yeah.